How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you here?
That's difficult to answer.
I'm not clear. How is it that playing the piano for people has eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital?
That's difficult to answer.
this the end? There's a noise inside my head of crying people facing death. Is this the end? Is this the end? I'm burning in the stone. There's no place to hide. I'm burning in the stone. This is the final time. What have we done to the world? What have we done to the world? I'm burning in the stone. There's no place to hide. I'm burning in the stone. This is the final sweet dreams are made of these. Who am I to disagree? Travel the world and the seven seas. Everybody's looking for something. Some of them want to use you. Some of them want to get used by you. Some of them want to use you. Some of them want to be out you.
Can we grow up a little bit and
Alt
not
Girl
be
sent
retarded?
$200. Have you
Please.
seen the work of Karlyn Borysenko? Anti-commie cult leader and is obsessed with looking at what actual far-left communists are talking about and organizing today, infiltrating them. They infiltrated the universities, schools, media. She has the receipts to back it up. Primary source evidence. Infestation is dire and she calls Republicans idiots eating slop. Agree.
Thank you for the big super chat. Yeah, oh, I know Karlyn B. She's solid. She's funny. I
The
like
Great
her.
Noticer sent $200.
I don't. She's anti-Christian, though. I'm not a fan of that.
The Great
I'm not anti-Christian, okay? I'm not anti-Christian. I just happen to not be a Christian, Nicholas. All right. Hey guys, welcome to the show. It's Thursday. It's what a week. What a week this has been. What a week this has been. Oh man, we got a big topic to cover today. We got a big topic because of course, Donald Trump has done what every conservative retard wanted him to do, because every conservative retard is absolutely convinced that all Trump needed to do to defeat Antifa was to declare them a terrorist organization. And now Trump has posted on Truth Social that he is declaring them a terrorist organization. And the entire conservative right rejoiced. Every conservative high-fived, and they said, we won, mission accomplished, we're winning, Antifa is a terrorist organization, we're winning. And let me tell you about the amount of conservative retardation that I have had in my comments on YouTube, because I posted a video the other day explaining clearly why there is no way that Trump can actually do what he says he's going to do. And I explained it really clearly. And of course, conservatives, because conservatives don't listen to information. Not all conservatives. If you're a smart conservative, I'm not talking about you. If you're someone that actually listens and takes in data and considers it and is thoughtful about it, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the retards on the right. And everyone knows there's retards on the right, and don't even bother to deny it, because everyone knows, okay? So I posted this video the other day explaining clearly and succinctly why Trump actually can't do this. And of course, the conservative retards didn't actually listen to the video. All they did was look at the title of the video, and then they came into my replies and they go, "This age like old milk. You're stupid. You don't know anything. Trump is going to save us. Everything is fixed now. Antifa's a terrorist organization." I'm like, you fucking retards. And someone posted this GIF last night in my replies. And I was like, you know what? This is absolutely perfect. This is literally exactly what's going on right now. This Antifa designation is Trump's George W. Bush mission accomplished moment. And if you don't know what this means, then you need to look that up, because I'm not going to explain. Essentially, like, the mission was not accomplished. Let's just say that. When George W. Bush stood on that aircraft carrier and they put a giant mission accomplished banner, the mission was not yet accomplished, because they didn't know what the fuck they were doing, and they declared victory before anything even happened, because they didn't know what they're doing. But of course, all of the conservative retards are high-fiving each other, and they're saying, we're winning. And I'm just over here going, do any of you understand how this works? Do any of you understand how this works? Because listen, man, listen. When I say something, I don't know why people don't understand this about me. When I say something, it's not that I'm just talking out of my ass. It's not that I'm making something up. If I am saying something on the internet, I have a very good reason to believe that thing. Either I have direct evidence that that thing is true in the form of video or documents or whatever, or I've talked to someone that I trust that is in a position to know, and they have told me that thing is true, and they probably have a long history of giving me correct information, and therefore I trust them when they tell me that something is true, because they give me right information all the time, over and over and over and over and over again. And so, listen, I know people that work in government. I know people that work outside of government now that used to work in government, and I've been talking to some of those people. And here is what I have learned. And it's just like, it's like when I actually talk to the people that have worked in government and understand how all this stuff works, what I have learned is that basically there is a general consensus among people that actually know what they're talking about, not retards on the internet that are running their mouth, but among people who actually know what they're talking about, that Trump is so full of shit, that this terrorism designation is not going to do anything. And listen, I've said this before and I'll say it again. If I actually thought that Trump designating Antifa as a terrorist organization was going to be a productive exercise, I would be cheering it, man. Like, no one would be happier than me. I've been dealing with the far left for years. I've been researching and investigating and going undercover with the far left for years. Like, no one would be happier than me about this if I actually thought that this was going to do anything. But the reality is this, and this again is based on me talking to people in the government who know what's up, not a PR like narrative bullshit brigade on Twitter, okay? In order for Trump to designate an organization a terrorist organization, he needs to do two things. One, he needs to know the name of the organization. He needs to actually name the organization. Calling something Antifa is not knowing the name of the organization, because, spoiler alert, the vast majority of Antifa organizations are not called Antifa. They are called something else. And I would bet all the money in my bank account that Trump doesn't know the names of most Antifa organizations in the country. So he cannot fulfill obligation number 1, which is to name the organization. And what a lot of conservative retards seem to think is going to happen on Twitter is that Trump is going to declare every leftist at every protest to be a member of Antifa. He can't do that. You can't go into court. Trump is going to have to argue all this stuff in court. You guys understand that. The ACLU is going to be suing to high heaven over this issue. Trump is going to have to go into court and prove that every single person that he goes after with this is actually a member of a named organization that is actually Antifa. There are a lot of leftist organizations that are not Antifa and have nothing to do with Antifa. There are a lot of leftist organizations, for example, the Party for Socialism and Liberation. This is the one that all the conservatives know because there was a big Twitter hullabaloo about it. The Party for Socialism and Liberation, which is actually funded by the CCP, which is an anomaly on the far left. The Party for Socialism and Liberation is not Antifa. You can't just wave a wand and call it Antifa because you fucking feel like it, okay? The other thing they have to have is an articulatable concern with that organization specifically. So Trump needs to know the names of the organizations, which he doesn't know. Trump also needs to be able to have an articulatable concern with that organization specifically, which he does not have. And if he doesn't have those two things, he cannot designate it as a terrorist organization. And I promise you, I've been doing this for a while. I've been dealing with the stuff like this for a while. There is no universe in which Trump can do those two things. So Trump can announce on Twitter, you can't do this. You can't do that. What are their names? Do you know what their names are? Do you have any idea? Do you have any idea what they call themselves? Guess what? Trump doesn't know what they call themselves either. You cannot just say this organization is called X, Y, B, and Z. You're going to have to fight that in court. And the organization's going to come in and go, that's not our fucking name. That's not what we're doing. We're doing this over here. You have no proof that we're engaging in these activities. This is all going to have to get fought in court. So I understand everyone wants their high five moment. I get it. But this ain't going to work. And this is going to be one of those situations where I tell conservatives something they don't want to hear. Conservatives get pissed off and they have a hissy fit and they roll around on the ground crying and then they call me all sorts of names and they smear me and all this stuff. They have a hissy fit because they're not getting the talking points they want. And then 3 to 6 months later, I'm going to be proven 100% right with every single thing that I said the first time. Am I ever going to get an apology for the amount of bullshit that I have to put up with from conservatives every time I tell them that something they don't want to hear? I'm sorry, this is not going to work. That's just fact. Is it fair to say Antifa is an umbrella term? Yeah, Antifa is an umbrella term, and and there are Antifa organizations. Like you can name Rose City Antifa. Rose City Antifa is an Antifa organization. The vast majority of Antifa organizations in the country, though, are not Rose City Antifa. The vast majority of Antifa organizations don't even have Antifa in their name. And again, the Trump organization, or the administration rather, doesn't know what they're called. So he's using Antifa as a broad, like, umbrella term, and that's not going to work because in order to designate something as a terrorist organization, you need to actually name the organization and have an articulatable concern with that organization specifically. So this ain't going to work. This is all just a big PR stunt, and it sucks. It sucks that this is a PR stunt. I would love for it to work, but it just ain't gonna, man. It just ain't gonna. It addresses a symptom, but not the disease, communism, and it just gives the government an excuse to up the surveillance on people. Well, yeah, that's the other thing. That's the other thing. 100%. This does give the government an excuse to up surveillance on people, and that's going to impact all of us. That's not just going to impact the bad guys. That's going to impact all of us. See, this is another conservative retard talking point. Trump has all these experts that know all these things. Really? Really? He does, huh? Really? Then why haven't they done anything before this? Then where were those experts during the June riot season? Where were those experts during the encampments on college campuses where they were taking over buildings? Where were those experts anytime the far left has done anything? Where were those experts in 2020? Trump told us he was going to declare Antifa a terrorist organization in 2020, and then he never did. Where were those experts then? You guys seem to think there are a lot of people in government that are doing a lot of things that I promise you are not happening. And we know they're not happening because if they were happening, we wouldn't have had riot season in June. We wouldn't have had months and months and months of college encampments in the last 2 years. We wouldn't have had most of the far left bullshit that we've been dealing with. You guys think that Trump's counterterrorism team has just been sitting back and twiddling their thumbs and now they're going to start behaving competently? I don't buy it. I don't buy it at all in any way. Let me go in the chat. There's literally no proof that Trump even knows what he's talking about. And I'm going to be proven right about this. And I'm sorry. I am going to be proven right about this. I absolutely know. Let's see. All right. So just wait for it, and I will take my I told you so's in about 3 to 6 months. And if anyone comes into my comments on my YouTube channel and you say anything to the effect of, this opinion aged like old milk, you're stupid, you're dumb, you're a secret, do you guys know? Do you guys know how much I've been accused of being a secret leftist in the past 2 days? Do you have any idea how many conservatives have accused me of being an undercover leftist in the past 2 days because I wasn't telling them what they want to hear? This is my struggle. This is when I write my memoirs. This will be called My Struggle. My struggle with conservative retardation. The constant, never-ending uphill battle that I have to fight with the conservative right to get them to hinge into reality. And every time I try to show receipts to conservatives, they go, who are you funded by? You must be a secret. I actually got accused by a conservative last night that has like 200,000 followers on Twitter. She said, Karlyn, who are you funded by? And I was like, you know who I'm funded by? I'm funded by people who pay $8 a month or $80 a year for my Substack and who send me super chats on YouTube. That's who I'm funded by. She's like, no, what organization pays you to say all this stuff? And I'm like, bro, yeah, you caught me, conservatives. You caught me. I am a secret undercover leftist. I have been going undercover at leftist events for years. I've been reporting on leftist events for years, but you got me, conservatives. Really, because I'm not telling you what you want to hear at any given moment because I tell you the truth instead of some bullshit conservative narrative. You got me. I'm a secret undercover leftist. It ends when I fucking say it ends, and I don't care that you got gifted a channel membership. I will ban your ass if you whine in my channel. What time she's saying mean things? Why is the mean woman saying mean things about me? It ends when I say it fucking ends. You want to know why? Because this is my stream, and if you whine and complain, I will show you the fucking door. We have 2 rules on this channel. Number 1, don't be a dick. Number 2, no whining. This breaks the no whining rule. I don't want to hear it. I don't give a flying fuck about your feelings. If you don't like what I'm saying, Scott, go clean up your own fucking side and tell your own side to stop behaving like unhinged retards on the internet. My God. Does any other conservative want to have a hissy fit in my chat before we get started? Oh, fuck me. Fuck you. You're now permanently banned from my channel. Go away. Goodbye. I don't care that you're a channel member. You didn't buy that channel membership. You got gifted that channel membership the other day. I didn't just ban a supporter. That person got gifted a channel membership. I specifically remember it. So go fuck yourself. Don't come back. Go back to Fox News. Bye. This is for the Karlyn will be right tip jar. Yeah. Yup. I wish I could give you his channel membership. I wish I could do that. Yeah, how ungrateful. How ungrateful to be gifted a membership on my channel, then come here and say, fuck you, tell me exactly what I want to hear. No. No. That's not what we do here, bro. We hinge into reality and we look at receipts and we talk about what the real far left is doing, and we do not negotiate with conservative bullshit con artists on Twitter. Anyway, that's all I have to say about that. But we've got a fun thing we're gonna do today. So there is an Antifa professor. And when I say that Michael Loadenthal is an Antifa professor, See, look at this. Yeah, exactly. If I was actually an undercover leftist, I really suck at it. Exactly. Renan gifting 5 channel memberships. Hopefully good people get the channel memberships this time. Fizzle got one. Emily got one. Oh, I'm happy Emily got one. Emily's been in the chat lately. Internal Machine got one. Orthodox Boomer Grandma got one. Professor B got one. Congratulations to everyone who got a channel membership. Awesome. We get to the material when I say we get to the material. Calm the fuck down. All right. Yo, more gifted channel memberships. Thanks, guys. Cooper Cowboy, thank you for that. Leonardo got one. Cameron got one. Scott got one. Scott, you're on probation because that other Scott was an asshole. Debbie got one, and I don't know how to pronounce your last name, but that other guy got one as well. His name begins with a T. I don't know how to say that word though. Thanks, guys. Okay. Hang on, Trendolin. Thank you, Trendolin. I'm giving it a lot of thought, and I think that I'm going to turn in my resignation to the Libertarian National Committee. It's so dysfunctional that nothing is ever going to get done. Trendolin, I think that's one of the smartest things you ever did. Libertarian politics is a giant fuck-off waste of time. You know, I tried to navigate libertarian politics for 2 years. I really tried. I was on my best behavior. I tried so hard, but libertarian politics is a giant waste of time. It's never going to go anywhere. It's a constant headache. You can't do anything productive. It is a massive shit show. They may have beautiful values, but man, do they suck at organizing. So I think resigning from the Libertarian National Committee is probably one of the best decisions you've ever made. And when I come to San Francisco, and we're going to talk about that, not today, but we're going to talk about that at some point, we're going to go out and have a good old time. And you're not going to have to deal with any of that shit anymore. Okay? Everyone support Trendolin resigning from the National Libertarian Party board. Okay? Anyway, back to this. So there is an Antifa professor. And when I say he is an Antifa professor, what I mean is he is in Antifa or was in Antifa, and he now teaches at colleges and universities, and he writes books about Antifa. And one of the books that he wrote is a really fascinating book that maybe we should actually read at some point. I've wanted to do it for a while, but it's really long. It's called The Politics of Attack, Communiques, and Insurrectionary Violence. And this is by Michael Loadenthal. And you can find this book in the Anarchist Library. This is a book about Antifa. And you know, this isn't the first time I've covered Michael on my channel. I covered Michael on my channel about a year ago. You can see right here, the cult number 183, Antifa professor Michael Loadenthal on the far right. Now, an interesting thing, after I covered Michael Loadenthal a year ago, the video that we watched in this episode, which was a full interview with this guy, that video has magically disappeared off the internet. So after I covered him, I didn't download the video. I should have probably downloaded the video, but I didn't even think of it. After I covered this guy the last time, the video that we covered in that episode, in which there are many clippable moments about this guy being in Antifa and talking about being in Antifa, they removed the entire video from the internet. So my coverage of it is literally the only archive that exists of this particular guy. And I was a little disappointed in that because I was like, maybe we can go back and watch that video of that Antifa professor. And then Stony Baloney or Master Shake said, Karlyn, they deleted the video. And I was like, damn, that would have been a good thing to cover. Gothic, heard my bestie use the word heteronormative the other day, referencing a straight couple. She's being influenced by her non-binary roommate, but rolls her eyes at me when I reference you and say it's about anti-capitalism. Hopefully she learns. Gothics, thank you for the thanks for the super chat. I do appreciate it. But I went and did some research. I went and I did a little bit of research. And I found out that Michael Loadenthal in March, Michael Loadenthal did a podcast in which he was specifically talking about the government labeling Antifa or leftists as terrorists. And I found this podcast on It's Going Down. It's Going Down is an Antifa website. There is, we do know where Antifa posts their stuff. Well, some of the places they post their stuff, we can identify very popular Antifa websites. It's Going Down, which is itsgoingdown.com, is a very popular, very well-known Antifa website. And on this website, I found this podcast interview called Everyone's a Terrorist, Outlaws and blah, 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 whatever. Why is the government obsessed with labeling activists on the left terrorists? This interview was conducted March 19th, 2025. So we don't have a video to watch of this interview because it's a podcast, but we're listening to the podcast. And I want to know what this Antifa professor said on this podcast about the government labeling leftists as terrorists, because I don't know, it kind of seems relevant. It kind of seems relevant to what's going on right now. So maybe we should listen to what they're talking about. I think this might be a really good idea. We have the episode here. We're going to be listening to it. It's about an hour long. I also do have some other videos of Michael Loadenthal that we might get to. We also might not get to them. It really just depends. Also, when I was researching this, I discovered something funny when I was looking for stuff with this professor. Let me show you what I discovered. Now, I don't use Blue Sky all that much, but I do have an account on Blue Sky. I have several accounts on Blue Sky, actually. Just to be real for a second, I have several accounts on Blue Sky. I have a Blue Sky account in my real name. I also have several other sock accounts on Blue Sky that people can't identify. And when I went on my Blue Sky account under my real name today, this professor had blocked me on Blue Sky. Now, this is fundamentally suspicious to me because I don't interact with anyone on Blue Sky. I don't even do anything on Blue Sky. I've never even interacted with this professor in my life. So why on earth would the Antifa professor, if he's not doing anything wrong and he's not doing anything suspicious and he's operating completely above board, and I've never interacted with him, I've never said fuck off anything to him, why would the Antifa professor be blocking me specifically on Blue Sky? This is always suspicious to me. Now, it's not like I can't go in one of my other accounts and see everything he posts. I can do that. I'm just pointing out that it's a little bit weird that he has proactively blocked me on Blue Sky. Yeah, they want to bring an end to the era of McCarlinism. It's true. It's true. Yeah, probably friends with Emmy O'Brien. Yep, Emmy O'Brien is an abolish the family socialist who told everyone to block me on Blue Sky. And, they did, but I have another account that they don't know about, so whatever. Anyway, guys, so we are going to spend the bulk of our time today listening to this podcast with the Antifa professor, where he is overtly talking about people being labeled a terrorist by the government. Why is the government obsessed with framing leftist activists as terrorists? How can we understand this strategy in the context of the recent U.S. movement history? Dr. Michael Loadenthal, the Antifa professor, anti-fascist data researcher, they literally call him that, and terrorism studies scholar, joins Outlaw to help answer these questions. Conversation topics include how post 9/11 terrorism policy shapes repression of social movements today, the Green Scare and the emergence of domestic terrorism and eco-terrorism, and the targeting of non-citizen student activists like Mahmoud Khalil, and much more. And this episode closes with a brief update on Cop City. So we got a lot of topics to cover, and you know what? The best stuff is usually the stuff that's not even in the subject matter. So we're going to listen to the whole thing and we're going to hear what this guy has to say. Maybe it will be relevant to what's going on right now. Maybe not. We're going to have to see. Before we get into that, guys, a couple quick announcements. Number one, please, as always, make sure you are subscribed to my Substack. That is Karlyn, Karlyn, .substack.com. Last night, I did an epic 5-hour Twitter space. I didn't expect it to be 5 hours, but it was indeed 5 hours long, where I went and talked about the far left. We talked about queer Marxism. We talked about the Antifa bullshit myth that Andy No keeps pushing. We talked about so many subjects. There was a lot of great conversation, a lot of great questions, a lot of great dialogue. Other activists joined that have been doing stuff against the far left for years and years and years. My good friend Gabrielle Clark joined. She was on the space. There was a lot of other people, and it was just a really, really great discussion. I have uploaded the audio of it to my Substack. I will be uploading it it to YouTube as well. You can also find the link over to the Twitter space. And honestly, it was one of the best conversations I've had with a while. I know it's 5 hours long, but I really do hope people take the time to listen to it because, yeah, even Kino made an appearance. We appreciate that. So check it out. And while you're on my Substack, make sure you sign up for $8 a month, $80 a year. You guys fund the work I'm doing. I am 100% independently funded by people just like you that just want access to the receipts and want access to the truth. I'm not beholden to any political tribe. I will never shill a political narrative. I will literally just show you the primary sources of what's going on, and we can talk about it and we can break it down. The issue with Andy No is that he is lying to millions of people about what's going on, and he is shilling a bullshit narrative that is not based in reality at all. I've covered this on the channel. I covered it the other day. I showed receipts of it the other day. You can go back a couple episodes and find those receipts. But yeah, Andy No is, and listen, man, on a personal level, I actually really do like Andy No. On a personal level, like, I appreciate a lot of the work that Andy No has done. On a personal level, I love Andy No's book. I think it's a great book. I have nothing but respect for the stuff that he's done in the field. But when he starts lying to people and shilling a narrative, that's where I start to have a problem with it. I do not believe in misinforming the public. I think it's the job and responsibility of people who put themselves in positions of informing the public that they tell the fucking truth. And they don't make up words, and they don't make up groups, and they don't ignore evidence. Andy No is flat out ignoring evidence about what is going on the far left. And I know that because I sent him the evidence months ago in private, and he never looked at it, and he never interacted with it, and he refused to consider it, and he refused to share it with people. And so now I'm at the point where I'm just like, okay, Andy, you want to lie to millions of people? I'm going to call you out publicly, and maybe it means nothing, and maybe no one really cares, but I am so sick of these conservative influencers lying to their audiences and keeping their audiences ignorant about what is going on the far left. We have actual problems in the world. We have actual problems in the world. And if people can't hinge into reality and deal with what the real far left is doing, we are never going to be able to solve those problems. And every time a conservative bullshit con artist influencer lies to their audience, it just makes it more difficult to beat the real far left. So that is the problem with Andy. And I really hope that Andy No gets it together and stops feeding bullshit to his audience. I really, really do. This is not a personal thing. As a person, I like him. This is a very strong intellectual disagreement that I have with him, and I'm not going to keep my mouth shut. I kept my mouth shut for a long time. I tried to talk to him in private. He didn't want to hear it. He then threw a massive hissy fit and unfollowed me on Twitter. So if he wants to throw a massive hissy fit and unfollow me on Twitter and pretend I'm the one lying when I'm the one that has the evidence, no, he can go fuck himself, and he can get it together. And if he gets it together, then no one will be happier than me. Anyway. All right, with those rants out of the way, let's get into it, shall we? Let's get into it. Let me set up the sound. Guys, please make sure you have mounted the like button if you have not already. If you don't feel comfortable mounting the like button because you and the like button just met or something and you're still getting acquainted, you can high five the like button. You can shake hands with the like button. You can put your arm around the like button. You can give the like button a kiss on the cheek. You can give the like button a slap on the ass. You can do whatever you want to the like button, whatever you feel comfortable doing. But please do something to the like button. There is a shocking disparity between the number of people watching right now and the number of people who have introduced themselves to the like button. So please do that. It helps out the channel. It helps get my content in front of more people. Please make sure you are subscribed if you are not already. I stream Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern time. We do Socialism Saturday on Saturdays at 6 p.m. We are listening to this podcast with the Antifa professor called Everyone's a Terrorist with Michael Loadenthal. Let's get this party started.
Hi, and welcome to Outlaw, a podcast about how the law is used to repress social movements in the U.S. I'm your host, Olive, and today I'm talking to anti-fascist data researcher and terrorism studies scholar Michael Loadenthal about, well, terrorism. These days, it seems like just about anything can make you a terrorist. Sleeping in a tent on your university's lawn, attending a music festival in the Weelaunee Forest, or setting a cop car on fire. So what's up with terrorism? To answer this question, I'm going to talk with my
I love how they're like, guys, isn't it crazy how setting a cop car on fire can label you a terrorist? You know, we're just setting a cop car on fire. I don't know what the big deal is. This is how Antifa thinks.
Michael about the recent history of this strategy for chilling dissent and how it fits into the current landscape of repression. Stay tuned after the interview for a related update on the past year of repression against the movement to stop Cop City. If you like the show, you can support us by telling your friends and following us on Blue Sky at Outlaw Pod. This podcast is not legal advice, nor is it an endorsement of any particular kind of action. I'm excited to welcome Michael Loadenthal onto Outlaw. Michael, to start, could you introduce yourself and share a little bit about your research on the state's repression of social movements?
Sure. So my name is Michael Loadenthal, and I use he, him pronouns. So I am based at the University of Cincinnati, where I've been for the last few years. And my work is largely based on active ethnography and document analysis. So what I really try to do is to excavate some of these leaked and otherwise found documents and to use them to determine kind of how the state is operating from behind closed doors. So it's a big part of what I do. I also really focus on data-driven analysis. So I run a research center, an all-volunteer research center called the Prosecution Project. And we work to kind of excavate some of these court records to use them to understand how the state operates.
It strikes me that this guy is already doing what I'm trying to do with the Center for Left-Wing Studies, which is to put together a volunteer army of people researching the left and actually looking at their materials. And I just want to note this. So people who don't know, I have a nonprofit called the Center for Left-Wing Studies. You can find it at leftwingstudies.com. And it just launched, so it's brand new, but I'm trying to put together ways to map the modern activist left and to research their propaganda and do all that stuff. The impetus for this is that the left already does this to us. You guys know this, right? There are actually entire research centers at universities that are dedicated specifically to studying the right. I named the Center for Left-Wing Studies the Center for Left-Wing Studies because there is actually a Center for Right-Wing Studies at the University of California, Berkeley. And within the Center for Right-Wing Studies at UC Berkeley, there is the Institute for Research on Male Supremacism. Yale also has a specific center that's that Yale actually, I covered this a while ago. Yale University actually has a research center where they send students and faculty members undercover at conservative events. Like they actually send people to Turning Point USA events just to research what it's like to be at the events and to report back and to inform their donors what the evil right-wingers are doing. So I want people to know this. The left is actually studying us. They study us through these nonprofits and these centers at these universities. They've already got all this stuff set up, but I just started the Center for Left-Wing Studies because I'm trying to build something that is studying them in the same way that they're studying us.
In terms of prosecuting political dissent and other forms of political violence. I really believe in the sort of intellectual tradition of people like C. Wright Mills, who have argued, somewhat controversially, that the purpose of studying society, the purpose of understanding society is to change it. I realize that there are some people who believe that knowledge production is sort of a neutral endeavor. I think that's like not only dishonest, but it's not desirable. And so I sort of lean into the fact that our work needs to be very, very empirical, very, very provable, demonstrable. And it's not just take my word for it, but that it should have an agenda. And the agenda is making society better and improving and uplifting large parts of society. The other thing I'll say is that because my work is focused on social movements and affected communities, I really work hard to make the work non-extractive. Like I'm not, parachuting into a community that's not mine, sort of taking its stories and knowledge and writing about it. I generally work within the communities in which I research, and I have for decades. And I've worked amongst these communities, both in counter repression and in training people for security for now at this point, 20 years. And so I really try to make that a part of the research I'm doing. So I try to produce research that is useful to my community. And to do that in a way that's non-extractive, which is not particularly simple.
So, speaking broadly, why is the framework of terrorism helpful for the state? What are some of the things it achieves?
Sure. So the framework for terrorism has been used, for hundreds of years in a sense. And what it largely is used for is to establish discursive powers, to establish the power of discourse, and to defame one's enemies. Without much nuance, we can say overall that terrorism is a label used by the powerful to kind of describe those who lack power or those who are
Oh
marginalized.
my God.
And,
Oh my God. Oh my God. Guys, the only reason that the Trump administration is trying to label Antifa a terrorist organization is because the powerful are trying to oppress the minority. Wow. Wow. Let's go back a little bit and listen to that again.
other thing I'll say is that because my work is focused on social movements and affected communities, I really work hard to make the work non-extractive. Like I'm not, parachuting into a community that's not mine, sort of taking its stories and knowledge and writing about it. I generally work within the communities in which I research, and I have for decades. And I've worked among.
I generally work within the communities I research, and I have for decades. When I say this is an Antifa professor, what I'm telling you is this is someone in Antifa who just told you he is in Antifa, and he is using his affiliation with Antifa to document Antifa on an academic level. So he's self-reporting on the organizations that he is himself involved in.
These communities, both in counter repression and in training people for security for now at this point 20 years. And so I really try to make that a part of the research I'm doing. So I try to produce research that is useful to my community, and to do that in a way that's non-extractive, which is not particularly simple.
So, speaking broadly, why is the framework of terrorism helpful for the state? What are some of the things it achieves?
Sure. So the framework for terrorism has been used, for hundreds of years in a sense. And what it largely is used for is to establish discursive powers, to establish the power of discourse, and to defame one's enemies. Without much nuance, we can say overall that terrorism is a label used by the powerful to kind of describe those who lack power or those who are marginalized. And, there's just a lot of historical examples of this. From the well captured ones like the Battle of Algiers, as captured in the film The Battle of Algiers, to maybe less well studied ones, in the contemporary where some of the kind of activism and terrorism lines are blurred. So generally, it's used as a term to kind of defame one's enemies, and I think its function is to kind of inscribe interpretive narrative atop of political actions. In other words, by calling someone or someone a terrorist, or by calling something terrorism, the speaker is hoping to proactively interpret those actions and that individual for you. They're trying to tell you this is how you should understand this form of dissent. And as you're probably aware, there's a number of pre-existing.
I want people to understand this. One of the reasons that we're listening to this is going to give us what the left-wing narrative is going to be about Trump designating Antifa a terrorist organization, right? So what is the Antifa professor saying? He's saying, listen, guys, the only reason the government designates a group of terrorist organizations is the government is trying to control the narrative. They're trying to craft a narrative. They're trying to exert power over these organizations that they don't like to craft a narrative in the media. And we are the oppressed ones that have to fight back against the narrative. Yeah, they're saying terrorism is in the eye of the beholder. Exactly.
Political violence discourses that you're already well familiar with. So, we have ones like Outside Agitator, which has, anti-Semitic and anti-Black histories and things like that. We have the one which was really common in the anti-globalization era, the so-called entitled activist, the idea that activists are just like bored, rich, trust fund kids that want something to do. There's also the notion of professional protester. This came up a lot in the Gaza encampments, but these sort of narratives.
I love this. He's basically going through all of the conservative talking points about the left, and he's like, this is a narrative, and this is a narrative, and this is a narrative. And by the way, He's not actually wrong about that. So the whole idea of like the outside agitator during the Gaza encampments, he's actually not wrong about that being a conservative narrative. In fact, the left was openly bragging. They don't call them outside agitators, but the left was openly bragging about, we're bringing in non-students to help us do this effectively. So that was actually a strategy on the part of the left to bring in people outside of campus to help them protest more effectively on the college campuses. Yeah, the paid protester thing, that's also, he's actually not wrong. That is actually a bullshit conservative myth. I mean, there are paid protesters, but they're paid in the way that the left creates all these organizations within their ecosystem to support their organizing, to support their activism. Guess what? Those organizations are funded and those organizations have jobs. And people get jobs in those organizations. And so if someone is like a program director within a leftist activist organization, are they considered to be a paid protester? Well, that's a real job. That's a real job, just like any other job. And the left is so smart in that they have literally created organizational ecosystems that are entirely dedicated to advancing their political interests. Why hasn't the right done the same thing? So it's not like the left is not paying people $15 an hour to show up at protests. The left is paying people to be professional organizers within their organizations that they set up specifically to advance their political interests. And so every time people try to own them for these things, it's like the left is being smart. You're like, the right are the ones that are not being smart. The left is being smart about this. So it's kind of funny. He's going through all the conservative talking points about the left and just like being like, no, that's not true.
Something terrorism. The speaker is hoping to proactively interpret those actions.
No. Most of these organizations are not funded by USAID. Most of these organizations are not funded by George Soros. You guys have got to give up on the bullshit funding narrative. You don't know where most of their funding comes from. You really don't. And every single time you guys are like, we can cut off their funding. Then why haven't you? If you guys know where all the funding is coming from and you guys can just cut off their funding, then why the fuck haven't you? You haven't, because that's not where the funding comes from. And the Trump administration knows that, and they feed these bullshit lines to the conservative base to say, this is all just paid protests. Then why the fuck haven't they done anything about it? They haven't done anything about it because those aren't the real funding sources.
And that individual for you. They're trying to tell you this is how you should understand this form of dissent. And as you're probably aware, there's a number of pre-existing political violence discourses that you're already well familiar with. So, we have ones like outside agitator, which has, anti-Semitic and anti-Black histories and things like that. We have the one which was really common in the anti-globalization era, the so-called entitled activist, the idea that activists are just like bored, rich, trust fund kids that want something to do. There's also the notion of professional protester. This came up a lot in the Gaza encampments. But these sort of narratives, right, outside agitator, entitled activist, professional protester, are meant to inscribe a certain interpretive logic on top of otherwise, difficult to interpret and diverse political actions. So these are the kind of tropes that are used to defame movements, and through defaming and mischaracterizing movements, we're able to kind of defang them and coordinate their repression through not just hard forms of repression like beatings and arrests, but through discursive repression and ideological forms of countering.
Yeah, could you say a little bit more? I know you said discourse and discursive. Could you just, in even more simple terms, explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, so a discourse is sort of how we decide the limits of a conversation. So, when we say,
Show of hands in the chat. Well, let me do it this way. Press 1 in the chat if you agree with Annie that there is going to be a massive RICO case against the far left, and they're going to expose all the funding sources, and RICO is going to save the day, and RICO is going to take care of the problem. Press 1 in the chat if you agree with Annie about that. Press 2 in the chat if you know enough about the far left to know that this isn't going to happen. because the RICO thing is not real, because it's all dependent on conservatives knowing what they're talking about, and they don't know what they're talking about, and they don't know where the funding sources come from, and they don't understand that these are highly decentralized organizations that are mostly almost all funded by mutual. See, look, I have the smartest audience on the internet. Look at all the twos in the chat. I fucking love you guys. Look, I have the best audience on the internet. Everyone in my audience knows that this is a conservative bullshit narrative. Guys, you really have to question anything coming out of the Trump administration about the far left, because again, I promise you, they don't know what they're talking about. I will tell you when they get it right. No one would be happier than me if the Trump administration knew what they were talking about with the left. No one would be happier than me. I would be shouting it from the rooftops if the Trump administration got it right. I would be like, holy shit, they talked to someone, they know what's going on. This is great. They have no idea. And no, Annie, it will not be fleshed out. There will be no RICO thing because that's not how they're funded. They are funded by mutual aid. Okay, there are four main funding sources for the far left. There are dues that they pay to the organizations they're a part of. This is like $5 a month, $10 a month. The Democratic Socialists of America, you pay like $15 a month in dues. The Revolutionary Communists of America, you pay 1 day's wages per month to be a part of their organization. You get like newspapers and stickers and stuff like that. So dues are one way they fund what they're doing. Voluntary donations, mutual aid goes under voluntary donations, where it's people throwing in $5, $10, whatever. Maybe sometimes they're bigger, mostly all cash. I see someone saying mostly all cash. Yes, mostly all cash, untraceable. They're also funded by publishing. Publishing and book sales are massive on the far left. There are so many revolutionary bookstores all over the country. There are collective groups that sell this stuff. There are massive socialist book publishers. So publishing is a huge funding source of the far left. Publishing books, doing book tours, selling books, doing periodicals, that sort of thing. Also event ticket sales, conferences, educational events, book signings, stuff like that. So those are the main funding sources for the far left, okay? Let's get this super chat in from Rottweiler. Thank you, Rottweiler. The far left is funded by book sales, publishing deals, ticket sales to their events. They're paid to talk, direct donations from their fellow comrades. It has nothing to do with Soros. It has nothing to do with USAID. Conservatives are lying to their audience every single time they say that. It's all about mutual aid. You guys can watch that presentation. We've talked about mutual aid many times on the channel. We will be talking about it again. Thank you for the super chat. So, guys, Soros has never funded the far left. Soros funds progressive causes. Progressives and leftists are not the same thing. And Annie, no matter how much you say this, it is not true. Oh my fucking God. Annie, please stop acting like a low IQ retard on my channel. Please stop. I don't tolerate this stuff. I'm being very nice to you because you have a channel membership that I think someone gifted you, but please stop acting like a low IQ retard and listen to what we're trying to tell you. The fact that you guys don't listen is why you continue to lose. Anyway, let's get back to this.
What is the discourse on patriotism? There are certain things we can talk about while talking about patriotism. So the kind of discursive boundaries, or the boundaries set by the discourse, say what is and is not included in that discussion of a particular topic. So, the ways in which the state uses discourse is a huge topic, but generally it's used in a way to provide explanatory frameworks for things. So in other words, we are taught to think about certain topics in certain ways. So the discourse on patriotism is set for us, right? What idea you can accept or what position you can accept within that discourse is limited by the discourse itself. In other words, by establishing these realities, we can kind of pen the range of a particular conversation and say that things outside of that range are thus not valid. So the discourse says which ideas and which notions are kind of valid within a larger conversation.
Okay, listen, Annie, if I'm wrong and you're an actual supporter, then I apologize. I take it back, but you're still not listening, okay? If you pay me money every month directly, I appreciate it. I really, really do. I appreciate the support. I can't do this without you guys. But it makes it even more important for you to listen to what I'm saying, girl. I'm not lying to you. I'm not trying to trick you. I'm telling you the truth, but you got to listen. There are going to be no RICO charges. I promise you, there's going to be no RICO charges that has anything to do with Antifa at all. They might try to do something with the Party for Socialism and Liberation. If there's any RICO charge, it's going to have to do with the Party for Socialism and Liberation, but the Party for Socialism and Liberation is not Antifa. They're not even the biggest problem that exists on the far left. So please, I appreciate the support, Annie. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much. But please fucking listen.
Using terrorism to describe activists or any marginalized community. It's setting the bounds of the conversation. It's
That's
defining
exactly right.
how we can look at them. Totally.
Yep, that's exactly right.
So to understand how the state has weaponized this label of terrorism, I want to start at 9/11, which you've written a lot about as a key moment. What was the significance of the state's response to 9/11 for social movements, specifically in terms of state repression?
Yeah. So 9/11 was a watershed moment in a lot of ways. When 9/11 occurred, the anti-globalization movement, or what was called the anti-globalization movement, was really at its height. So just to rewind a little bit, right? People probably recall the November 1999 so-called battle in Seattle. This is an event in which 40 to 60,000, demonstrators shut down the meetings of the World Trade Organization that were being held in Seattle, Washington, and at least to the media and a number of other.
What about Antifa? Doesn't really sell merch. They don't really believe in that sort of thing. Antifa mostly operates on donations. So I've never seen Antifa merch be sold. I have seen people that are really far left people sell t-shirts and stuff like that. But I've never seen Antifa organizations sell merch in any significant quantities.
Kind of talking heads, people were shocked by it. They were really caught off guard. And this sort of represents sort of a high watermark in the anti-globalization movement, which we could say runs from about 1997 to about 9/11. During this time, every meeting of international financial groups was a large site of protest. So every meeting of the World Bank, the meetings of the International Monetary Fund, which occurred, in DC in the fall and spring, the meetings of the G8 and the G20, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So whenever these groups would meet, to say nothing of presidential inaugurations and other sorts of things, there was, a groundswell of activity, tens of thousands of people. It was not a challenge in, let's say, 2000 to get 40,000 people to demonstrate against the World Bank. And then when 9/11 happened, it really derailed that in a pretty severe way. In part, the fall ministerials, the fall meetings of the IMF and the World Bank were to occur a few weeks later. If memory serves, it was the 29th of September that they were, because, these things are kind of dated in activist parlance, and I believe it was S29, but sometime around the end of September was meant to be the fall meetings of the IMF and the World Bank. So a number of groups in the DC area, most notably the Anti-Capitalist Convergence and the Mobilization for Global Justice, which sort of represent the anarchist side through the ACC and the sort of libertarian socialist, but not explicitly anarchist.
So I want to rewind this so people can hear. They're talking about the anti-capitalist protests, and they specifically said they were anti-capitalist. So it's important to when we're talking about Antifa are anarcho-communists. Okay, so they don't believe in the government and they don't believe in private property ownership. He just called them libertarian socialists. There's no fucking thing as libertarian socialist. Libertarians believe in private property ownership. They do not believe in the government, but they do believe in private property ownership. There is no thing as a libertarian socialist. They're anarcho-communists, okay?
Weeks later, if memory serves, it was the 29th of September that they were, because, these things are kind of dated in activist parlance, and I believe it was S29, but sometime around the end of September was meant to be the fall meetings of the IMF and the World Bank. So a number of groups in the DC area, most notably the Anti-Capitalist Convergence and the Mobilization for Global Justice, which sort of represent the anarchist side through the ACC and the sort of libertarian socialist, but not explicitly anarchist side through Mobilization for Global Justice. These groups had mobilizations planned. They had planned to welcome tens of thousands of people. And then 9/11 happened. And I think that represented a lot for people, because what that meant is that when September 29th rolled around and the demonstrations occurred, basically everyone but the anarchists pulled out. So, during that mobilization, there were, I would say hundreds of people, probably in the low thousands, represented by the ACC. But I think that was a moment where myself and lots of other organizers looked around and we said, this is different, right? People are afraid to be called terrorists. People are afraid to show dissent, because by showing dissent in a very unnuanced way, they're kind of lumped into this other category. So the demonstrations in September of 2001, were really just, very, 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 very marginalized, or marginal rather, compared to the other demonstrations that had happened prior.
Wait. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. You're lying. Are you lying just to make me mad? Are you lying to make me... Can someone else confirm this? Did Tim Pool say that libertarian socialists are a real thing today? Timmy, showing his low IQ retardation yet again. There is no such thing as a libertarian socialist. Oh, Tim. Oh, this is why, guys. This is the problem. This is the problem with why the right is so misinformed, because they listen to retards on the internet who don't know what they're talking about.
So I think when that happened, a lot of us looked around and we said, this isn't going to work anymore, right? People are not going to come by the droves if they're going to be called terrorists. And so this was kind of a start, but not the highest point of this kind of state's terrorization, what I would call terrorization rhetoric, a rhetoric where any form of dissent or many forms of dissent were described as terrorism, right? That kind of began in the 9/11 era. Arguably it started before then. So if we look at some of the FBI annual reports that came out in like 1998 and 1999 and 2000, we'll see the elevation of specifically animal and environmental demonstrators, so-called animal liberationists and eco-liberationists. So if you want a sort of proper noun, you can think of the Earth Liberation Front and the Animal Liberation Front, but we really mean a more broadly defined.
So just in general, I just want to mention this. So we don't talk a lot about the animal liberation part of the far left, but there is a very committed animal liberation, Antifa activists. There's also, one of the most insane topics on the far left is the eco-justice people that literally talk about blowing things up and things like that. We should probably cover that more on the channel. I just want people to know there are absolutely very distinct movements on the far left about animal liberation and eco-liberation. And when they say eco-liberation specifically, they're generally talking about blowing things up that they believe are causing harm to the environment.
Politicians who sort of were just social movement starting in around 1998, 1999, these groups were described by the FBI as, domestic terrorists. And, in a number of well-chronicled comments, they were described as the #1 domestic terrorist threat. Again, when 9/11 happened, that sort of felt kind of ludicrous, even though there were some politicians who sort of used that #1 domestic terrorist label even after the death of nearly 3,000 people. Now, mind you, the animal and earth liberation movement, having existed, globally since the 1970s and in the United States.
Hang on. I want to answer this question. I'm not going to be pausing all the time to answer questions, but if people send in a good question in the chat, I'll answer it. The far left exists all around the world. I focus almost exclusively on the far left in the United States because I am in the United States, and so that's what I care about. No offense, Australians, but what I will say is the far left in Australia is actually way worse than the United States. The far left in the UK is actually way worse than the United States. The far left in Canada, way worse than the United States. So, that's bad news for you guys. I do actually have I do have a fair number of people who watch from Australia, which I appreciate. Australia is fucked. You guys are going to have a real hard time like fixing that problem. So the United States is not the most far leftist place in the world. We certainly have a lot of problems, but there are other countries that have it way worse. And sadly, Australia is one of those countries, and New Zealand. And I'm very sorry about that, but it is what it is.
A little bit after, has no blood on its hands in that sense. There are no histories of that movement going after people and murdering people, or putting bombs in civilian sites or even in non-civilian sites. Again, without going down a rabbit hole, there are some people who will quickly kind of throw the so-called Unabomber case, the Ted Kaczynski case in there. But anyone who looks into that with any degree of specificity sees that that's well outside of this movement whatsoever. And actually, Kaczynski was very against these movements and certainly not a part of them. But anyway, throughout this sort of 30-year history, when the animal and earth liberation movement exists, it's not doing what we would typically regard as terrorism. It's not hijacking planes, not blowing up buildings, et cetera, et cetera. So I think in the late 1990s, when these groups started to be described as terroristic, people were somewhat suspicious. And then when 9/11 happened and people continue to describe both Salafi jihadi as terrorism and animal, and earth liberation groups in the same vein, I think that felt false to a lot of people. And so seeing the images of these sort of things, co-occur.
Hang on, I saw a question. Do I ever fear for myself? I mean, I live in New Hampshire. We have a lot of guns. I don't think anyone's going to come to my house. If they do come to my house, they're going to be met with a gun. I live about a mile away from the police in my town, so it would be very easy for them to get over here. I don't worry about myself when I'm home at all. I do worry if I'm out at an event, if I'm like going undercover at something. I worry I'll be recognized, especially if I'm like alone with them. But that hasn't happened yet. And generally, I do generally feel pretty safe when I'm out. But yeah, I mean, not really. Maybe I should worry more, but I don't know. I kind of think that whatever is going to happen is going to happen. And so I'm just doing my thing, and I'm going to do what I want to do, and I'm going to cover what I want to cover, and I'm going to go to the events I want to go to. And I believe that spirit will keep me safe. And that might sound cheesy. I'm not a Christian, but I do believe in something, and I do like ask for protection and stuff like that. I actually had a witch put a spell on a necklace that I wear all the time when I'm out for protection when I was at this last event in New York. And so I didn't feel unsafe. And if something ever happens, it does. And if something ever happens, it was meant to be, and I will go down as a martyr or whatever for my cause. And I guess, that's something. So anyway.
On federal publications, I think was pretty bizarre. And again, those are sort of.
Sorry, I'll answer this question too. I don't take offense if Christians pray for me. Because I think prayer is just energy. So if you want to pray for me and you're a Christian, even though I'm not a Christian, I don't take offense to it. It's positive, and so I appreciate it. I appreciate all positive energy. So okay, I'm going to shut up now. We're going to listen.
I think in the late 1990s, when these groups started to be described as terroristic, people were somewhat suspicious. And then when 9/11 happened and people continue to describe both Salafi jihadi as terrorism and animal, and earth liberation groups in the same vein, I think that felt false to a lot of people. And so seeing the images of these sort of things, co-occur on federal publications, I think was pretty bizarre. And again, those are sort of some specific examples, but there's lots of things we could point to. We could point to Operation Backfire, which is the FBI operation, which kind of came down in 2005 against members of the Animal and Earth Liberation Front. This is, following the well kind of known arson in Vail, Colorado, and a number of other large-scale arsons. So that was in 2005. A couple years later, in 2008, we have the passage of the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, which we can go back to and talk about. But again, that represents sort of a line that was crossed. So, to say that anyone who breaks the law in the name of animal rights is thus committing an act of terrorism is a very specific, again, kind of discursive line to draw. And so that's in 2008. And that was sort of a reissuing of a previous law called the Animal Enterprise Protection Act, and then it was renamed into the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act. Again, the other example that, if folks want to look into this more, is the 2007 prosecution of the RNC-8, the so-called RNC-8. These are 8 activists who were charged for disrupting the Minneapolis Republican National Convention. And again, were held under state domestic terrorism and Patriot Act statutes. And so these are, really interesting to have nonviolent demonstrators charged under, laws assumingly set up for national security purposes. So 9/11 had a number of kind of cumulative effects. One is that it took a lot of activists sort of out of the game because they didn't want to be confused with, like, quote unquote, those scary terrorists. And so people kind of ran away from dissent and ran away from clandestine dissent because they didn't want to be lumped in with Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, et cetera. But it also allowed politicians and political elites to sort of craft laws to say, look, we need laws to protect you from, buildings falling and scary people and airplanes and things like that. And so the kind of damage of 9/11 and the lethality of 9/11 was exploited and weaponized against domestic political movements. To say nothing of the way it was weaponized against Arab and Muslim and South Asian cultures, which is a separate topic and deserving of its own study. But here, what I really mean is how the policing of one movement that's certainly not a leftist movement was sort of exported onto the left, and arguably it continues to be utilized in the same way to this day.
Yeah, can you say more about that when you say continues to be utilized in this way to this day?
Yeah, I can. It's sort of a tricky era to study political violence. It's now March of 2025. For those who are listening to this in close to when we recorded it, every day under the new administration, there are sort of new examples.
I need to rewind that. I need to rewind that and listen to that again to make sure I understand what he just said. I apologize, but I need to listen to that again.
In 2005, a couple years later, in 2008, we have the passage of the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, which we can go back to and talk.
So the reason I'm rewinding it is Master Shake asked, was this Bashback? Bashback was in 2008, so that's what I'm listening for.
About, but again, that represents sort of a line that was crossed. So, to say that anyone who breaks the law in the name of animal rights is thus committing an act of terrorism is a...
Hang on, I'm going to answer this question. What is the connection between anti-capitalist and eco-weirdos? The far left believes that capitalism created climate change. So therefore, all of the eco-weirdos, the eco-terrorists, they're anti-capitalist because they believe that capitalism created the problem in the first place and that the environment and climate change will never be solved until we get rid of capitalism, because organizations put profit over people, and so they did all these things that destroyed the environment for the sake of profiting, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. So eco-weirdos are anti-capitalists, universally.
Very specific, again, kind of discursive line to draw. And so that's in 2008. And that was sort of a reissuing of a previous law called the Animal Enterprise Protection Act. And then it was, renamed into the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act. Again, the other example that, if folks want to look into this more, is the 2007 prosecution of the RNC-8, the so-called RNC-8. These are 8 activists who were charged for disrupting the Minneapolis Republican National Convention. And again, were held under state domestic terrorism and Patriot Act statutes. And so these are, really interesting to have nonviolent demonstrators charged under, laws assumingly set up for national security purposes. So 9/11 had a number of kind of cumulative effects. One is that it took a lot of activists sort of out of the game because they didn't want to be confused with, like, quote unquote, those scary terrorists. And so people kind of ran away from dissent and ran away from clandestine dissent because they didn't want to be...
You might be right, but it also could be something else. Bashback absolutely protested the RNC in 2008. They also protested the DNC in 2008. But it is also possible it could have been other people, because I'm sure there were many protesters of the RNC. We would have to look. I bet Crime Think has an article about this somewhere that we can look in and see what happened. But it's a good question.
Lumped in with Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, et cetera. But it also allowed politicians and political elites to sort of craft laws to say, look, we need laws to protect you from, buildings falling and scary people and airplanes and things like that. And so the kind of damage of 9/11 and the the lethality of 9/11 was exploited and weaponized against domestic political movements. To say nothing of the way it was weaponized against Arab and Muslim and South Asian cultures, which is a separate topic and deserving of its own study. But here, what I really mean is how the policing of one movement that's certainly not a leftist movement was sort of exported onto the left, and arguably it continues to be utilized in the same way to this day.
Yeah, can you say more about that when you say continues to be utilized in this way to this day?
Yeah, I can. It's sort of a tricky era to study political violence. It's now March of 2025. For those who are listening to this in close to when we recorded it, every day under the new administration, there are sort of new examples to point to. Today on my ride in to work, the big discussion is a U.S. green card holder who is now facing deportation and a revoking of his citizenship for his role in the Gaza encampment protests of last spring. Things like that, I think, would not have been possible without the kind of discursive shift which happened after 9/11. The idea that those in dissent are therefore un-American, or those in dissent are therefore not part of the national community or not deserving of citizenship is a thing I don't believe we would have been able to push without 9/11. When you have responsive policy, responsive policing policy, you need a boogeyman. You need something to point to say, if you don't do this, this scary thing will happen. And 9/11 provided that. Arguably the October 7th attacks in southern Israel have provided that in a different way. Arguably, some of the far right movements that have happened since 2017 have provided some of these examples. And so the realities that were established in 2001, the idea that dissent against the nation state is a form of terrorism, or can be a form of terrorism, is something that we certainly see now. And again, without going into kind of a larger thesis, what I've argued is—
Listen, I hate to burst your bubble. Green card holders do have free speech protections in this country. And it is absolutely bullshit of the Trump administration to try to be deporting people for legal speech. Like, that's actual bullshit. If you guys think that's not going to be used against the right at some point, you are literally fuck off insane. So you can share this all you want, but as someone who is, I'm literally married to a green card holder. As someone who's married to a green card holder, I find it personally offensive every time conservative retards say that you should be able to deport green card holders for speech you don't fucking like. You are dumb if you think this is not going to be used against you at some point.
In the past, is that this has sort of occurred in epochs, you could say. That, between the late 1990s and the early 2000s, we have this era where, everything is kind of terrorism. So again, it kind of starts with the Animal and Earth Liberation Front and the so-called Green Scare. And then it obviously, reaches this apex in 9/11. And then it sort of tapers because, there are other things that come up. Again, it before tapering, it's really used against, for example, Somali communities in their equation for equating them to members of Al-Shabaab, and South Asian communities, equating them to supporters of the Taliban, and there's all sorts of ways. And that's what I would argue kind of we're seeing right now. The equating of Palestinian demonstrators or pro-Palestinian demonstrators to terrorist supporters. So we kind of see this in the late 90s, early 2000s, and then the early 2000s, for whatever reason, after 9/11, we see that some of that terrorist labeling declines, and what we see is an increase in another form of defamation, which is people who commit crimes are charged as felons. In other words, misdemeanor crimes are kind of recast as felonies, and there's a whole litany of state laws which we could point to, which we see happen here, largely in response to the Black Lives Matter movement, the campaign against the Dakota Access Pipeline in Standing Rock, the campaign against the Mountain Valley Pipeline, some immigration work in the South, for example, the campaigns against No Mas Muertes and other groups like that. And then 10, 15 years into that, we see the state shift again and start calling everyone rioters. So, we could say it's a period of riotization. So we kind of have this period where everyone's terrorists. That's kind of in the early or late 90s. And then we have this period sort of in the middle where everyone's a felon. And then, by the kind of reemergence of the Black Lives Matter movement, 2016, 2017, everyone's a rioter. And that's sort of, what we saw is kind of terrorist to felon to rioter. And again, in the new era, in this.
Hang on. Reminder. Loadenthal, who we're listening to right now, was charged for organizing the riots against Trump riots against the first Trump inauguration. Excellent note. Again, when I say this guy's an Antifa professor, what I literally mean is he's an Antifa and he's a professor, and he does research about Antifa as a professor. So guys, so I know that some of you might be surprised at the tone that this is taking. This is actually how Antifa talks in the real world. This is actually how their documents read. When you read their documents on CrimeThink, or you read their documents on It's Going Down, or any other places, or you read their zines, this is actually how Antifa talks. And the reason I stopped to point this out is that that they're not stupid. This guy is not stupid. This guy has built an entire intellectual career around being an Antifa and studying what Antifa does and writing books about Antifa and explaining Antifa's perspective. So this is the Antifa perspective, what we're listening to right now.
Kind of 2025 era, I am guarded in making future predictions, but we're going to fit into, one, if not more, of these boxes again.
Oh my gosh, there's so much there. Even just thinking about that.
No. I didn't say he was self-employed. He works for universities. They work for universities. You guys think that leftists don't have... What? I just got... Hang on. I have to make a phone call. I will be right back. I'm going to let this play. I have to make a phone call right now.
Period of anti-globalization protest, and followed by 9/11 and the shift from domestic terrorism in the animal liberation movements to terrorism feels so parallel to even what we were seeing with the focus on Stop Cop City and domestic terrorism, and then the October 7th Palestinian uprising and following genocide and the criminalization of Palestine protests, the shift to terrorism and focus on, the more global idea of a terrorist. Could you talk a little bit about how the state's image of the terrorist differs from that of the domestic terrorist and the role that race plays? I thought you provided a really interesting example in deconstructing terrorism about the image on the cover of a 2012 Joint Terrorism Task Force report that featured photos of Osama bin Laden, a masked Animal Liberation Front activist holding a liberated primate, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, a Hamas fighter, and the Tamil Tigers.
Yeah. So there's I don't have the image in front of me, so it's not super fresh, but yes, the way in which this reality is kind of cast generally follows heavily racialized and heavily ethnically linked patterns. So speaking in the broadest terms possible, and this is how I explain it to undergraduate students sometimes, because I think this is a useful frame to begin from, is that terrorism is understood as something they do to us, right? And they are understood to be non-white and non-Christian and non-American, right? They are othered. That's the sociological word. So terrorism is something they do to us, and they are understood in this othered capacity, and us are understood as this kind of white, Christian Anglo-Saxon society, which obviously includes, not only does it not include me, but doesn't include most people in this society. So that's generally how it's understood, right? Sometimes if you look at literature on extremism, which is sort of the more domestic word used to describe the same actions, we're often talking about in-group and out-group. J.M. Berger's work, he did a book a few years ago, I believe it's just called Extremism. But he does a good job explaining this, the kind of notion of, inner community and outer community, in-group and out-group. This is what social movements sort of develop. But when we look at it in broad strokes, domestic terrorism, or what we sometimes often call extremism, is sort of something we do to us, whereas terrorism is a word that's kind of reserved for an external threat that sort of comes, into the cities. And so, what I think is really bizarre is combining these things in the same discussion. So this cover that you speak of that has traditional foreign terrorist organizations. And again, I'm trying to use the language which is like precise and accurate. Do I think that all of the organizations and networks included on the foreign terrorist organization list are equivalent and should gain the label of terrorist? No, I don't. But like that is what they are. They are the foreign terrorist organizations. So I'm not going to like continue to make air quotes because you can't see me. But I think that this language is important, but also extremely problematic. Anyway, my point is that almost every entity on the foreign terrorist organization list, which is a legal list of organizations maintained by the Department of State, you can look it up online right now. You just type in FTO list, Department of State, you will find it. Those organizations are understood as foreign. That is the legal basis for them. One of the confusion points in this country, which makes me want to, just set fire to every TV I see, discussing this, is any discussion you hear about adding people or removing groups from the domestic terrorist list. You hear this conversation constantly, and it's a ludicrous conversation because there is no domestic terrorist list, at least in a public open source legal basis. Do I think the intelligence, officials in the US government maintain lists of domestic organizations? Of course they do. But there's not a domestic terrorist designation list in the way that there is for foreign groups. In other words, you can only be considered on a legal basis a terrorist in this country or committed an act of terrorism if you partner or do work for a foreign terrorist organization. There are no legal domestic terrorist organizations, therefore domestic terrorism as a sort of federal construct doesn't really exist. Now, again, that changes state by state. But generally, when we kind of talk about the way in which terrorism is cast, specifically in the law, terrorism is something done by non-white, non-Christian, non-Western entities to a white Christian American entity. And that's sort of the way it plays out. There are very, very rare exceptions to this. One of the kind of, I think it was a fuck you to the incoming administration, but one of the last actions of the Biden administration was to designate a far right group as a domestic terrorist organization. And I think that was extremely rare. And if you look at the list of FTOs, very, very few of them outside of the Russian imperial movement, fit into that category. And again, that demarcation is unique for the United States. So when you look at Canada, if you look at equivalent so-called Five Eyes countries, so Canada, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, a lot of those countries do prescribe American-based or US-based domestic entities as foreign actors. So groups like Atomov and the Base, the Proud Boys, groups like this. But in the United States, those groups are not considered terrorist organizations. And just to be clear, I don't think they should be. I don't actually think that really helps anything to overuse that term. But other countries have different designations. So whereas in some other countries, terrorism can occur from a group of people that look like the domestic population. In the United States, that's really not the case. The United States, terrorism is done by people who are not us, to us.
Going back a little bit, you've quoted the ALF support magazine Bite Back, in which the authors explain the Green Scare as legal and extra-legal actions taken by the US government against environmental and animal rights activists. Like the Red Scare, the Green Scare uses new laws and new arms of the state to harshly punish a few individuals in order to repress an entire movement. You write, the reactionary development of the Green Scare label coincided with the state's own invented language, an attempt to quantify and label their enemies under one banner, eco-terrorism, a term coined by the government in 2002. And talking about the stage that the Green Scare set and the sort of new norms that were set then, are there any either ones that were part of Operation Backfire or other examples that you feel like are really important or maybe often overlooked in terms of both emerging at that time in connection with a terrorism framework or important in how they're showing up today?
So, I mean, the Green Scare represents just a really interesting period. It sort of represents a time period in which the state shifts its focus a little bit. Again, there's a lot I've kind of written about here about this sort of state's attempt to change the way it polices. And again, I'll do the kind of very brief version of this, largely through the work of people like Michel Foucault and other post-structuralists. There's this notion that power occurs in different ways. And again, this is a very truncated version of very complicated work. But, largely what Foucault would say is that, there's different kind of eras of power, epochs of power. So there is sort of the power of the king, right? What we call monarchical power. So monarchical power is the idea that, like, when there is dissent, the king, like, brings you to the town square and chops off your head. And everyone sees that. And they're like, oh my God, I don't want to, rise up against the king because, like, I will get my head chopped off. And, like, that's really bad. And so at a certain point, after enough heads have been chopped off, monarchical power becomes no longer necessary. So after enough people realize that if they dissent, they're going to end up, on the executioner block, then people start to self-discipline or self-police or simply not act up is the better idea, right? So if you're considering overthrowing the government or leading a peasant uprising, the moment that you're like, you know what, if I lead that peasant uprising, I'm probably going to be drawn and quartered. And then you decide not to lead that peasant uprising. That is an example of what Foucault will call disciplinary power. So this is one of the things we see a lot in this era, is that the state uses monarchical power. In other words, they use naming and shaming. They use things like the FBI's most wanted list. They use these big public displays that defame people in the hopes that people will then self-police. And I think that has really worked, right? And that's something we kind of saw happening. So one of the reasons, the FBI was so shouty about, this person's a terrorist around 9/11, I think was that people would start to self-police. So again, if you look back at the most wanted terrorist list, now again, you'd have to use, the Wayback Machine and things like that. But spend a few minutes and do it. Find the URL for the most wanted terrorist webpage. I forget what the URL is, but put that into the Wayback Machine and look at it. Look at it in 2017. Look at it in 2012. Look at it in 2005, and you'll see a really interesting kind of pattern. One of the things is that during the era of the Green Scare, you have individuals added to the most wanted terrorist list who don't belong there in a lot of senses. There's that I think it's on Sesame Street. It's like, which of these things is not like the other? That's sort of the feeling I have. So again, I'll cite one example. Well after 9/11, we have Osama bin Laden, Ayman al-Zawahiri, and a number of other very central players in that conspiracy added to the most wanted terrorist list. Now, again, debating whether or not bin Laden and
Breaking news. Okay, I don't want to jinx anything. You guys ready? I don't want to jinx anything. I think I'm going to be on Fox News tonight. So I think I just got off the phone with Jesse Waters, producer, and I think I'm going to be on Fox News tonight. Fingers crossed. Holy shit. So I have to actually end the stream because I actually have to get information together for Fox News and actually go and, prepare myself to be on the TV. So that's crazy. I don't know what else happened in that podcast. We'll have to do that another day. Obviously, the spy stream tonight will be canceled. We're going to have to do that another day. That's okay. We're going to have the recording anyway. But I don't know. I feel like hopefully this happens. Hopefully this goes through. They asked me to send them stuff, so I got to go do that. Yeah. Unironically, fucking ironically. You guys are like, I got a text, like what happened was I got a text message from someone who I didn't know their number, and they said, "This is Jesse Waters' producer. Can you call me?" And I was like, "Yep." Yes, I can actually. In real life, yes, I actually can call you right fucking now. And so I'm gonna end the stream and I'm gonna go get this shit together for Fox News, and we will continue this when I have more. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. I apologize if you guys are excited about this, but I actually got to go do shit now. Holy shit, James is gonna oh shit, James is gonna have a fucking conniption. You're right. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. All right, I gotta go, guys. I gotta go. Pay attention to my Twitter. I gotta go, and I will announce stuff as I can. I gotta go. I'll see you guys later.
How are you feeling?
Well,
How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you?
That's difficult to answer.
Could you give me some idea?
I am not completely like other people.
What do you mean by that?
People dislike me because I am not completely like them. I am trying to do with my life something which few people try to do, and this influences my thinking and consequently my action.
What is it you're trying to do with your life?
Play the piano for people.
I'm not clear. How is it that playing the piano for people has eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital?
That's difficult to answer.